Welcome, Yamhill County, to Speaking Frankly. I'm your host, Howie Harkema, and our tagline is, "And how we doin'?" Today I have a wonderful guest, Jodi Hansen, who's the Executive Director of Remnant Initiatives, and we'll talk about what that means. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, Jodi, I'm so happy to have you here. So what is Remnant Initiatives?
Remnant Initiatives. So Remnant Initiatives is an organization that was started a couple of years ago to help our community better receive and serve people who are reintegrating after being incarcerated.
Very good. And how many people do you think that you've been able to serve over that time?
Well, we really started intentionally in January of 2018. So we got a 501c3 in 17, and then in January of 2018, a group of us got together and became an official board versus an advisory board. And we said, because everybody on our board had some experience with the criminal justice system.
Sure.
We have people that have actually done time in prison themselves. We have an attorney who works very closely to the impact of the justice system. Myself have been involved in prison ministry for over 10 years, or people with family members that had been justice involved. So we all got together and said, what do people who are releasing from prison need to be successful? And we put together what we call a roadmap to success, and it starts 6 months before somebody releases from prison. What are the things that we need to be working on so that you can walk out the door confident that you're going to succeed?
Sure.
What needs to happen on that first day? What needs to happen in that first week? And we followed that through for a whole year and put together this roadmap. And then in April of 2018, we received our first, what we call a neighbor in transition, and assisted him through his first year. How did he know about us? Because in January, when we were first forming, we had a volunteer who started writing letters into every person that was releasing from one of our 14, 15, I always depend on how they slice and dice the prisons,
right.
But from one of our state prisons into Yamhill County specifically. So we sent them a letter and we said, we're here and we'd like to help. If you would like some help, write back to us, and it started the process.
So were you a prison chaplain?
Not a chaplain. So I was a volunteer at Coffee Creek Prison, still am a volunteer at Coffee Creek Prison, and got involved with a ministry called Freedom in the Sun, and we work with women in small group Bible study and worship service, and then also in one-on-one mentoring. To answer your question, how many people have we helped in the last couple of years?
Yeah.
As it stands right now, we have 60 people whose lives we've touched, and 13 of those are still set to release in the beginning of 2020. So 47 of those have released into the community since we started.
So the population that are still in prison, that are anticipating coming out and going back into community, are they studying? Are they researching? Are you working with them as well?
So there's a lot that goes on. The Department of Corrections has programming of their own. And interestingly, if the nature of their crime is such that it clearly points at a drug addiction,
yes,
or certain other what we might call antisocial behaviors,
sure,
they have programming. So there's classes. In the case of drug addiction, they actually go into a segregated treatment program. So they are as if they are in inpatient drug treatment, separated from the rest of the prison population and working on their issues of addiction.
Sure.
And so they might be in a treatment program, they might be in special programming, they may have had criminal charges that don't qualify them for those kinds of services, which in some cases isn't great because it still might be addiction-driven crime.
Sure.
Let's say you stole somebody's car because you were trying to get money for drugs. If there weren't drug charges and if it wasn't part of your sentencing to make you eligible for treatment, you're not going to get the root cause of your crime addressed. So they might just be hanging on, nervous as all get out about what's going to happen when I hit release day. And that's a big part of what we do as well in those pre-release reach-ins. We have phone calls with folks that are arranged through release counselors or chaplains. We don't just have one-on-one phone calls, but we will chat with people and say, hey, what's causing you the most anxiety? What are you the most excited about? And just sort of getting them ready and building their confidence that you can do this. And we're going to be right with you as you do.
So when they do come out, do you try to get them in with maybe provoking hope or chemical dependency?
Yep.
To wrap around and...
Remnant Initiatives is not about recreating anything that exists right now. And it makes it very difficult when I look at raising money for the work that we do. I often say, look, if you're giving to any of these other nonprofits in the county that we are really dependent on our collaboration with them for the success of our clients, don't divert things. We need Love Inc. and Hope on the Hill and Provoking Hope and St. Barnabas, and I mean, the list goes on and on.
And on,
we need them to be strong and capable of intersecting with our folks. We also work very closely with the local Department of Community Justice. Most folks know that as, say, parole and probation. And so we work very closely with our Neighbor in Transition's PO. We make sure that our neighbors in transition, when they get out, that they have a phone and clothing and whatnot, and mentors to walk with them.
Boy, howdy.
Sometimes we'll know things that the PO doesn't know yet, because they might visit a PO maybe once a month or once a week, and we're out there on a regular basis having contact.
So why the name Remnant Initiatives?
So at its most basic, high level, 30,000 foot, a remnant is something small and an initiative is an action.
Sure.
And so there's a recovery saying that says, just do the next right thing. You just do, the little small things add up into a great life. On a deeper level, it comes from me hanging around as a child in my grandmother's sewing room. My grandmother was an avid seamstress. I should say sewer, that's not it, seamstress. And, she'd cut, as she was preparing a pattern, pieces of fabric that would then get thrown on the floor. And over time, she'd pick those up and she might take and cut squares and turn it into a quilt.
Sure.
Or she might use a piece of that, say, to patch one of her grandkids' jeans.
Sure.
She's notorious for patching the inside of our jeans with her remnants. And so these remnants that are thrown aside, much like we as a society think that we are throwing aside people that we incarcerate, we actually need to sew those people back into the fabric of community if we ever want to realize healthy and safe neighborhoods.
Sure, that makes more sense than anything. So why awareness, action, and advocacy?
Well, awareness, because as I have conversations with people who look like me and have similar lived experience,
Sure.
Professional, educated, white, well-resourced, and I talk about the state of reentry for people coming out of our prison system into community, and they look at me and say, well, don't we have halfway houses to deal with that? Or, I never thought about what happens after people go to prison. We send people away and think that's the end of it.
Right.
And the reality is that over 95% of everyone that we incarcerate will come right back to the neighborhood where they offended. That's the law. They come right back into the communities that caused the problems in the first place.
Sure.
So awareness, first of all. Second of all, and this is probably just a personality trait or defect, some would say, in me, is that I have a very, very low tolerance for talking and not doing. I am a doer. Yeah, I am a doer. And so once you've gained that awareness, once you've learned something, you can't unknow it.
That's right.
In which case, you best put your feet to the street and get some action going. And that's different for everybody. Not everybody has to load up their car like I do on a regular basis and run folks who need to get to appointments, doctor's appointments, PO's appointments. I was hanging at Provoking Hope earlier today looking for somebody. You don't necessarily have to be that close to the cause. But being close enough to understand, and maybe that action is listening differently to political rhetoric around law and order or tough on crime versus smart on crime versus the various jargon that's being used by those in public office. Maybe you vote differently. Maybe you think differently about safety in your own community. and take some action. Maybe, as a good friend of mine, Mark, is fond of saying, he says, my job is to work at the front end of the problem, and he is devoted to youth in the community. Whereas I'm actually working at the back end, and our volunteers are working at the back end of this system, the drivers for crime, and then the way that we deal with crime.
Right.
And then somebody walks out the door, and it's sort of an afterthought to say, maybe we should have thought about who they were going to be when they re-entered community while we were going through these other
Which is what
processes.
you're doing.
Right. So action, there's an action that everyone can take.
Sure.
Doesn't mean you have to get in and devote your days and nights.
So, what
Advocacy. You said
yes,
awareness,
yes.
action, advocacy. And then advocacy is then once you get proximate enough to a problem, and I'm fond of saying proximity is the key to understanding. I think I ripped it off from somebody I read, and I don't remember
We
who
all
I
do.
should quote. But once you get proximate to a problem, whatever your resources are, as I said, I'm a white, well-resourced, educated woman. I then have a duty to advocate for those who maybe don't have the same voice that I do, to create a better level of understanding so that we can realize that dream
Right.
of healthy and safer communities.
Are you a mandatory reporter?
I'm a mandatory reporter not because of remnant initiatives.
Right.
I'm a mandatory reporter because technically I still have RN behind my name.
Yes.
Haven't touched a patient in a long time.
Thank God.
Yeah, do not have a heart attack right now. The best I can do is dial 911. But I'm also a mandatory reporter because I'm an ordained minister.
Yes.
And so, yes, there are many things for which I must mandatorily report. But more importantly, in my role at Remnant Initiatives and how we train our volunteers in what we call the 4 R's. And so that means that we role model pro-social, law-abiding community and behavior to the people we work
Sure.
with. And then we reinforce and really cheer them on when we see them demonstrating those same kinds of behaviors.
Yeah.
Things you and I take for granted in the way that we move in the world. And then we will redirect any behavior. So if we see someone thinking, well, and I've seen this in some of our guys' Facebook posts, this is just too hard, I might as well just go back to prison. You know, what is the point of this? And I
Right.
remember the day I saw that Facebook post and somebody who had been doing pretty well, and I immediately picked up the phone and said, dude, what's up with this Facebook post? And he explained what it was that was creating so much grief for him on that
Sure.
day. And I said, okay, I understand why you're discouraged. But what you told me on the day that you released, and I asked you, what do you want for your life now? You said, I want to be in a relationship with my daughter again. I want to be good to my family and take care of my aging mother. And I have this wild dream of starting this thing I call the Thug Angels. And that's working with guys between 18 and 24 to help them avoid the path that I went on.
Right.
This guy's 41 at the time that he released from prison. And so in that phone call where I said, what's up with this Facebook post? He explained what was discouraging him. And all I said to redirect that behavior and that thinking was, but what about the Thug Angels? And it connected him to his dream for the life that he wanted. And he said, no, you're right. Going back to prison would be really stupid. And then the reporting piece of it, so the 4 R's.
Right.
The reporting piece of it is that if we do see things that are posing a threat to public safety or maybe a threat to the person that we are mentoring and coaching and working with, or maybe just something that makes you go, we report that immediately to their PO
Sure.
and problem solve. How do we get this person back on track and towards success?
That's wonderful. So you're talking about bringing people back into society holistically in every avenue that you're approaching this.
Yeah.
So what is your mission statement?
So the mission statement, it's interesting because we've been talking about how we assist neighbors in transition.
Right.
But assisting neighbors in transition to be successful when they leave institutions and come back to community also means assisting community to have that awareness, that action, and that advocacy, to understand who's coming back and what it is that they need to be successful. And so the mission statement is Remnant initiatives exist to inspire and coach community-minded individuals and groups into action that better or builds our capacity to serve our neighbors transitioning out of systems of incarceration back into mainstream society.
Fantastic.
It's a mouthful, but so many things that we do are encompassed in that statement. And so when we break it down, we say essentially we do 4 things. We remove critical barriers to success in early release. So we make sure that you have a phone and an email address. You can't get a job without that.
Impossible.
And that you have the right clothing to be able to interview, that you have the right documentation. Most people leave prison with nothing but a prison ID.
Sure.
And they don't have a valid state ID.
Right.
And you can't, you're off the grid if you don't have identification.
Right, and it doesn't take much money to get those documents.
No, an ID is $39.50,
Goodness.
or so yeah, we pay that.
Yeah,
we
of
pay
course.
that. We can talk a minute about what it costs to really set somebody
Right,
on
we
the
will.
road to success. But so we remove critical barriers to success in early release, and then we build pro-social community over time. If you've grown up in a family system where addiction and crime were the norm,
Sure.
you really don't know how to live otherwise. So having friendships and relationships that can role model that for you and getting you integrated into community, that's the building pro-social community over time. And then we recognize that the system is broken.
Right.
And so we advocate for change. And then also through our website, our Facebook page, we're experimenting with Twitter and Instagram, but I'm a little behind the curve due to my age and stage on how to actually to use those effectively, but we're working on that. So public awareness. So those are the 4 things that we do that are encompassed in that mission statement.
So you talked a little bit about your board of directors and that some of them had actually been in prison. So how does that peer-to-peer support work when they come out of prison with some of your board members?
It's well, I have an incredibly high capacity board, which is really common in startup nonprofits.
Sure.
It's not one of the boards that looks over financials and listens to a director's report and gives a rubber stamp. Everybody has their hands in the work.
That's the way it should be.
It'd be great if boards could do that forever,
Right.
but sustainability and growth, we could talk about
Yeah.
nonprofit management in another show. But our board, because we have people who either have had a kid that's been in prison or have been there themselves,
Sure.
we have several board members that interestingly have been victims and survivors of crime, and in some cases fairly violent crime. And yet we realize that at the end of the day, punitively running our perpetrators through a system that didn't effectively help them to transform wasn't going to help us heal. So there's that component of it as well for our board members.
Well, the lesson learned in prison can be really different than what you're talking about.
Yes, our local director of community justice, Jessica Beach, said it this way: prison is a college for criminality.
Boy, howdy.
Yeah, I like to use this analogy that we all know that when we are trying to change the behavior of a child, say a young child, a 2 or 3-year-old, that timeout is a good thing, right?
Yep.
But the way that our prison system works, or the way that our justice system works, is that we're operating as if the longer the timeout, the better the outcome. And if you really want a good outcome, put that wayward 2-year-old, 3-year-old in timeout with a wayward 8-year-old.
Sure.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So let's talk about the cost real quick. The cost for someone to be in prison and then to come out and transition back into society.
Right. Depending on if the numbers that you're looking at are including the cost of the buildings, in the state of Oregon, prison, a year of being in prison, and not counting the extras, the programming, the intensive treatment,
Sure.
those things. So just to warehouse you, to
Yeah,
put you in
right.
prison, is somewhere between $33,000 and $43,000
Per person.
per person.
Per year.
Per year. Per person, per year. what we have found in the 2 years that we've been doing this, and we started collecting data from day one.
I'm sure you did.
With this awesome database built by my friend Nick Peliquin, who also serves.
I know Nick.
Yes, serves on our board. And he jumped in and said, we're going to gather this data and build this database and do this right. So we started tracking from the very beginning, what do we spend on folks? And we know now, after 2 years and 47 people that have released, that we spend, at this moment, it could change a little bit.
Sure, it can vary.
But at this moment, $289.52 per neighbor in transition to get them set up and moving forward. So that's, like I said, things like the first month we go to Fred Meyer, we get a track phone, we get 1 month of unlimited talk and text. We say it's the best $54.99 that we spend. And that gets somebody on the grid immediately.
Right.
Going to Goodwill and getting those clothes, paying for that ID. Sometimes it means, like in one of our guys, Josh, he had a contractor's background. And he'd been out for several weeks, and he said, Jodi, I'm reconnecting to my contractor community, and a lot of guys have overflow work I can do, but I don't have any tools. And so there's another guy who's retiring, and he's got a bunch of tools. Can you help me buy the tools? I said, well, how much money do you have? And he says, well, I have a couple hundred. And I said, how much are the tools? And he said, the guy wants $350 for them. And I said, well, how much are they worth? And he goes, well, they're worth about $1,000. Well, I have a kid that's a major, like, he loves tools. Home Depot's really bad news for him, okay? Bad place for him to be. So I said, take a picture of the tools, Josh. And he took a picture of the tools, and I sent the picture to my kid. I said, what are these tools worth? And he goes, about $1,000. And I said, all right, we can spend $150 to get you working. And he's working like crazy. This is months ago. He's got so much work.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so when it all gets said and done, just under $300 is a game changer.
So we have about 6 minutes left. I know it's hard to imagine that, but talk about your funding sources real quick.
Yeah, so started out high capacity board, very committed people, and we all said, yeah, I can pitch in a couple hundred, I can pitch in $50, and we just kind of pulled it together, and that was the initial budget. And then we started through our community awareness.
Right.
We haven't been really intentional about asking for funding because we wanted to know what exactly are we asking for?
Right.
What are we going to do with that? I'm loath to ask for money and go, we're going to figure it out as we go. And now we've got enough information to go to the community and say, if this is something that resonates with you, would you like to pitch in and join with us? Over the time that we've been doing this, in July, the Department of Community Justice funneled to us. It's a $24,000 2-year grant.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. And it's a great show of confidence when parole and probation says what you're doing is worth it. So we've got a little bit of money from there. And then I got to give a shout out to First Federal. They have been fantastic in their community grants program in helping us as well. So that's where the funding's coming from right now.
That's fantastic. Talk about Wreckage of their Past.
Yeah. One of the hardest things when you have either in acting out because of childhood trauma or the experiences of violence that you've had, or drug addiction, your family system, or you came from a great family and just made some really stupid decisions in your late teens, early 20s,
Sure,
whatever.
that happens.
There's always fallout. And sometimes that fallout has resulted in harm. You've harmed others. Maybe you've lost relationship with your own children.
Sure.
Maybe it cracked somebody's car up. Maybe it really hurt somebody.
Sure.
Cleaning up the wreckage of your past goes as deep as, how do I make amends for the wrongs that I've done?
Right.
To, how do I just learn how to be more responsible with money? I've taken that step of giving up criminal behavior and I've got a great job, but I don't know how to manage money to save my life.
Right.
So our coaches, and we like to call them life coaches, so rather than mentors, but our coaches do a great job of saying, okay, what is it that needs to be addressed, and how do we help you not go to the default, which is, I'm just going to put this back here and pretend it never happened and ignore it until it goes away.
But it never goes away.
It never goes away. But when you're running and gunning, it's a great way to ignore your problems.
So tracking recidivism rates over the past 2 years, talk about that for a moment.
So at Remnant Initiatives, first of all, we think recidivism is a really low bar to set for human potential. And as communities, we've got to set that bar a lot higher.
Sure.
And where we set that is what we call sustainable self-sufficiency. You got a job, you're paying your taxes, you're staying clean and sober, you've got friends. That's the bar we set. But the number that everybody looks at when someone walks out of prison is,
right,
did they reoffend, did they commit another crime within 3 years of leaving? We've only been operating for 2, so we can't really say what our 3-year number is. Interestingly, the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission actually has 2-year recidivism rates.
Oh,
so
really?
what is that rate for people to be arrested? And there's 3 different numbers and it's complex. So what we're going to talk about right now is people who are arrested for a new crime. Okay, so in Yamhill County, the number that the Criminal Justice Commission reports, I just looked at this today, is about 43% of people who walk out of prison within 2 years will be arrested for a new crime.
Okay.
Okay. Out of the 47 people that we've helped since we've started, we've had 2.
Wow.
So if you do the math, that means we've got about 0.5%
right,
of people. It's a small number. Is it statistically valid? Am I willing to, shout it from the rooftop? No.
Not yet.
But it says something.
But at the 3-year mark, you may want to shout it
I
from the
may
rooftop.
want to. I may want to.
So we are running out of time. So let's talk about some of the stories, because that's really important.
How much time do I have real quick?
You have 2 minutes.
Okay, great. 2-minute story. So I'm in the car with a guy, we'll call him Aaron, and he's laughing. He's cutting it up and telling me about some of the crazy sauce thinking and things that he pulled when he was in prison, okay? I'm like, you punched a guy in a toilet? Really? I mean, that's just, he's like, yeah, I know, that was really stupid, whatnot. And so we're laughing it up, and then he gets real serious, and he says, Jodi, I gotta be serious with you. He said, thank you so much for everything you guys are doing. I've been to this rodeo before, and I really think it's going to be different this time.
Wow.
And I said, well, dude, because the mood had been pretty light. I said, dude, you know why I do this? And he goes, I don't know, you like guys like me? I don't, And I said, no, I do it so you won't steal my car. And no, Jodi, no. I would never steal your car. He goes, I mean, like, if I was jonesing for a heroin fix and you were some rando lady and I didn't know you, like, I would steal her car. But Jodi, I would never steal your car. I know you.
Oh, interesting.
And in that moment, I realized that is what we do. Creating relationships with people that want a new life so that they won't steal our car.
Isn't it all about relationships, though?
It always
I mean,
is.
our whole lives are about relationships.
It always is.
So the very last question, why do you do this important work in community? And you can talk about your faith, please.
Yeah, so I love my Bible.
Yep.
And when Jesus said, love your neighbors as yourself, I took that to heart. And for whatever reason, God has said, oh, I got a special group of neighbors for you to hang with. I will ask this. If you ever see me sitting at a coffee shop or in the grocery store and I'm with a person that might look a little sketch in your eyes, don't ask me where we met.
I will never ask you that, and you might see me with a bunch of the same.
Yep.
Yeah, I have great homeless friends, and I'm involved in their lives and such. So, amen. Thank you for doing this work, and thank you for being such a, how do I put it, bright and brilliant light in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jodi. And thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I know it's a hard subject to talk about, but the better that we see these things, the better that we can help bring our fellow human beings back into society. So thank you for watching.